I've got to ask, has there been a more self-serving and hypocritical royal tour than the one that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle just orchestrated in New York? I mean, so shameless. In fact, it was fake. I've got to ask for a start why Harry was even there. He only recently told Oprah Winfrey he'd never wanted to be treated like a royal.
I always wanted to be normal, as opposed to Prince Harry just being Harry.
Well, he might want to be treated normal, but Meghan Markle obviously very much wants to play the royal. So off they went to New York with a cameraman in tow, apparently to film it all for their Netflix documentary, with Harry also clearly wired for sound. And Meghan was obviously dressed for the cameras, wearing one costume on the morning of day one and another for the afternoon of day one to get maximum coverage in the ladies' magazines. The whole 3-day trip was orchestrated to mimic a royal tour, with the security, the media roped off, the vacuous meetings organised with dignitaries, so-called, to exchange platitudes and offer the royal encouragement as everyone posed for the cameras or soulfully stared at a wreath for the 9/11 dead and hugged students at a poor school. Although the dignitaries that Harry and Meghan managed to agree to all this were pretty low rent. I mean, the best that they could get for face-to-face meetings was the US ambassador for the United Nations, who later tweeted that they had an important discussion on the virus and racial justice and mental health. It makes me wonder, how do you have an important discussion? I mean, did it so important that it changed the ambassador's mind? It changed US policy? We're going to read about it tomorrow? It seems to me what the ambassador really meant was that they all felt important sitting there, self-important, in fact, sitting on the couch exchanging slogans as the cameras clicked. Now, if you think I'm too hard, I've got to say that this tour was full of not just empty gestures, but such obvious hypocrisy. For instance, one stop on the tour was to allow Meghan Markle to read a book to students, and it wasn't just any old book, it was her own book, with Harry again relegated as an extra to his wife's ambitions. He was sitting amongst the kids, and that's obviously just going to help her book sales. But the hypocrisy here, Meghan Markle says this book was meant as a tribute to fathers, which is rich since she's disowned her own father and helped Harry sort of split from his own. And then these Hollywood royals went on to a big global event concert, a global citizens concert they called it, to speak more platitudes about fighting the virus.
Look at all of us here, 60,000 strong, together in New York City! Are we prepared to do what's necessary to end this pandemic?
Now, if you thought the cheers were a bit muted when, let's all fight the virus together, that's maybe because another bit of hypocrisy. Harry was talking to a 60,000 big crowd that didn't seem that committed to social distancing for a start. And then at the end of this fake royal tour, Harry and Meghan were also big global warming warriors, remember? They flew home in a private jet. Joining me from London is Brendan O'Neill, editor of the online magazine Spike. Brendan, please explain this tour because it's got me beat.
Complete hypocrites, as you say. I mean, these are the people who said that they didn't really want to be royal, they just wanted to be left alone, and now here they are parading around. You can't open a newspaper without seeing these two people. They always say that we invade their lives. Actually, it's they who invade our lives. They're constantly in the press, they're constantly on TV. I just think to myself, leave us alone. But, it's this thing where they said they wanted to be normal, but in fact, what they're doing is actually quite serious. They're trying to set up an alternative to the monarchy, an alternative form of royalty. And I think the Queen and others in the actual palace should be pretty tipped off about that, and they probably are.
I think you're absolutely right. This is an alternative royal thing with no real responsibilities, and well dressed. They get she gets to wear top designer couture. Now, how is this all going down in Britain, though?
Not very well at all. I mean, I think what's really happening is that this is a clash. This is like a Shakespearean clash between the House of Sussex and the House of Cambridge, which of course is William and Kate, because that's where the real tussle is, over the younger members of the royal family and the question of who really represents the spirit of the royal family. Now, as I'm sure some of your viewers will be aware, I'm a Republican. I would prefer not to have a monarchy at all. But the attitude of most people in Britain is that William and Kate are far better representatives of the public duty that monarchical life requires, whereas Harry and Meghan have become these self-interested, narcissistic, wealthy celebrities who are constantly just walking around having paparazzi clicking at them and making their banal statements about the state of the world. So the preference in this country is unquestionably for the William and Kate style rather than the Harry and Meghan style.
Yes, but there's a real split, isn't it? And the US is going down a treat, particularly among the sort of woker elements of the media. You get your Vogue and all that. They're just giving it blanket coverage. And I'm just wondering what all that says about the woke culture, particularly in the US, that this sort of thing appeals. I noticed, by the way, that the cameras are all on Meghan Markle. She leads most of this stuff. Harry is just a sidekick. He must be embarrassed. But anyway, what does it say about the woke culture?
I think it's very revealing about the woke culture, and it couldn't be more different to the kind of culture that the Queen embodies. You know, the Queen is about self-negation, giving things up, making sacrifices in the name of national duty, public duty, being loyal to the crown, being loyal to something bigger than yourself. Whereas Harry and Meghan are really in the culture of narcissism, that modern culture that is self-obsessed. You only think about the self and your own self-interest and very little else, and which is all about feeling wounded and advertising how sad you are and how difficult your life has been and complaining all the time. So it really captures the difference between that new approach of self-pity and the older approach represented by the Queen, which was self-possession and getting on with life. And I think most ordinary people prefer the kind of values embodied by the Queen rather than by Harry and Meghan.
Beautifully put. Brendan, I was astonished to read that students in one British school have held a mock trial of an MP called Richard Drax, a rich man, over his ancestors' links to slavery. And the students found him a guilty man. They got an actor to stand in for him. And the head of the charity which organised this said there'd be more trials of Conservatives, I note, basically, because the younger generation, he said, should be angry because a lot of them don't understand how their chances in life have been diminished by my generation. Now, show trials to preach hatred of the British heritage to very privileged children in one of the luckiest countries on earth. Where's this going to end?
I think this is really, really worrying and actually quite repulsive. It's all the worst trends. Firstly, a show trial, which is never a good idea. Secondly, holding people responsible for what was done by people in the past who've been dead for a very long time. You know, the sins of the father, a very regressive idea. And just this desire to constantly go over British history, look for the worst stuff and educate the next generation to think that this is what our country is all about, the evils we committed in the past rather than the great things that we've achieved. It really captures the poisonous nature of wokeness in education, which is telling the next generation to hate their own country and to take part in these kinds of authoritarian exercises. It's really chilling, and we need more pushback against this kind of stuff.
Brendan O'Neill, you're so correct. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.